Everybody please have a seat. Have a seat. I know it's late. You're ready for the after parties? I should have ditched the speech and brought my playlist. Everybody looks beautiful. Hands you down for that introduction. Thank you to the CBC Foundation. On the challenges of our times, from giving workers a raise to getting families health coverage, on the threats of our time, from climate change to nuclear proliferation, members of the CBC have been leaders moving America forward.
Ma'am.
With your help, our businesses have created over 13 million new jobs. With your help, we've covered more than 16 million Americans with health insurance, many for the first time. Three years ago, Republicans said they'd get the unemployment rate down to 6% by 2017. It's down to 5.1 right now. You didn't hear much about that in the debate on Wednesday night. Point is, though, none of this progress would have been possible without the CBC taking tough votes when it mattered most. Whatever I've accomplished, the CBC has been there. I was proud to be a CBC member when I was in the Senate. I'm proud to be your partner today. But we're not here just to celebrate. We're here to keep going. Because with the unemployment rate for African Americans still more than double than whites, with millions of families still working hard and still waiting to feel the recovery in their own lives, we know that the promise of this nation, where every single American, regardless of the circumstances in which they were born, regardless of what they look like, where they come from, has the chance to succeed, that promise is not yet fulfilled. The good thing about America, great project of America, is that perfecting our union is never finished. We've always got more work to do. And tonight's honorees remind us of that. They remind us of the courage and sacrifices, the work that they've done, not just at the national level, but in local communities all across the country. We couldn't be prouder of them. The heroes of the Civil Rights Movement, whom we lost last month, remind us of the work that remains to be done. American heroes like Louis Stokes, and Julian Bond, and Amelia Boyd Robinson. And Ms. Robinson, some of you know earlier this year my family and I joined many in Selma for the 50th anniversary of that march. And as we crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I held Miss Amelia's hand. And I thought about her and all the extraordinary women like her who were really the life force of the movement. Women were the foot soldiers. Women strategized boycotts. Women organized marches. Even if they weren't allowed to run the civil rights organizations on paper, behind the scenes, they were the thinkers and the doers, making things happen each and every day. Doing the work that nobody else wanted to do. They couldn't always prophesize from the pulpits, but they led the charge from the pews. They were no strangers to violence. They were on the front lines. So often they were subject to abuse, dehumanized, but kept on going together. Mothers were beaten, gassed on Bloody Sunday. 4 little girls were murdered in a Birmingham church. Even if they weren't always given a voice, they helped plan the March on Washington, but were almost entirely absent from the program. And when pressed, male organizers added a tribute highlighting 6 women, none of them who were asked to make a speech. Daisy Bates introduced her fellow honorees in just 142 words that were written by me. Subject to ongoing investigation, so I can't comment on every specific one, but we can't avoid these tough conversations altogether. That's not going to help our police officers, the vast majority who do the right thing every day, by just pretending that these things aren't happening. That's not going to help build trust between them and the communities in which they serve. So these are hard issues, but I'm confident we're going to move forward together for a system that is fairer and more just. We've got good people on both sides of the aisle that are working with law enforcement and local communities to find a better way forward. And as always, change will not happen overnight. It won't be easy. But if our history has taught us anything, it's taught us that when we come together, when we're working with a sense of purpose, when we are listening to one another, when we assume the best in each other, rather than the worst, then change happens. Like every parent, I can't help to see the world increasingly through my daughter's eyes. And on that day, when we were celebrating that incredible march in Selma, I had Miss Amelia's hand in one of my hands. Michelle had Sasha's hand. My mother-in-law had Malia's hand, and it was a chain across generations. And I thought about all those women who came before us, who risked everything for life and liberty in the pursuit of happiness, so often without notice, so often without fanfare. Their names never made the history books. All those women who cleaned somebody else's house, or looked after somebody else's children, did somebody else's laundry, and then got home and did it again, and then went to church, cooked. Then they were marching, and because of them, Michelle could cross that bridge, and because of them, they brought them along, and Malia and Sasha could cross that bridge, and that tells me that if we follow their example, we're going to cross more bridges in the future. If we keep moving forward, hand in hand, God willing, my daughter's children will be able to cross that bridge in an America that's more free, more just, and more prosperous than the one that we inherited. Your children will too. Thank you, CBC. God bless you. God bless this country we love. Thank you.
Held last year was such a success, generating $33 billion in new commitments, that President Obama announced a second forum to be held here next year. Through our Doing Business in Africa, Trade Africa, we're working with African governments to improve the business environment and remove barriers to trade. With Power Africa, we've made a game-changing commitment to double access to electricity across sub-Saharan Africa. Expanding access to power is one of the best ways we can support African businesses, which in turn unlocks more growth and more trade. But this isn't like just flipping a switch. Power plants and electrical infrastructure take time to build and bring online. Like all bold ideas, successive administrations will have to carry this project forward. We're well on our way with new Power Africa projects slated to generate more than 20,000 megawatts of electricity. We're bringing back down barriers to greater investment in Africa's energy sector and have already facilitated deals that will create an estimated 4 million new power connections. Entrepreneurship is the spark igniting Africa's growth, and we're directly supporting Africa's dynamic entrepreneurs, nurturing their ideas and connecting them to resources. At this year's Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Nairobi, President Obama announced more than $1 billion in new funding from the U.S. government and the private sector to support entrepreneurs, much of it focused on Africa. Beyond that, we're investing in women and young people, and entrepreneurs who have the hardest time accessing financing and business networks. Second, a commitment to maximizing impact and delivering results is central to this administration's approach to development. In Africa, too many people, as you well know, still live in extreme poverty, eking out meager livings with their bare hands and sheer determination. Empowering Africa's most vulnerable is a cornerstone of our commitment to the region. President Obama's consistent focus has been on helping our development partners become self-sufficient. Today, African countries are setting their own priorities. We build our programs around African plans. And even as we continue to provide generous humanitarian relief in Africa and around the world, we've moved far beyond simply responding to the latest crisis. For example, we're helping more than 40 African countries build their resilience to climate change now, before vulnerable communities have to face its worst impacts. Through President Obama's Feed the Future initiative, we're making sure smallholder farmers can both feed their families and sell their harvests at market. Since 2010, we've invested more than $5.5 billion to improve food security in Africa and other regions. In the past year, Feed the Future has helped nearly 2.5 million African farmers raise their incomes by using new technologies and land management practices. Our nutrition programs have helped nearly 9 million African children get the nourishment they need to grow and thrive. And we hope to see Feed the Future institutionalized so that it continues to transform lives after President Obama leaves office. Of course, no one can succeed if they're too sick to work. So with our partners, we've developed country-led plans to build local health systems and to reduce suffering from preventable diseases. We're helping mothers and children become healthier and making labor and delivery safer. And we've accelerated progress against HIV/AIDS, bringing us within striking distance of an AIDS-free generation. Together with more than 45 countries, we've built a global health security agenda to improve our ability to prevent and contain devastating epidemics like Ebola. Think back to this time last year, when Ebola was spiraling out of control. Weak health systems buckling under the strain. But thanks to the heroism of Ebola responders on the ground, the leadership of Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone, and American support to galvanize a massive international response, we have brought the disease under control. As of last week, there were only 5 cases, and we will not stop until we get to 0. In our interconnected age, outbreaks of disease or violence or instability are no longer local concerns. They threaten entire regions and undermine global economic security. So the third area I want to discuss is how we're advancing peace and stability across Africa. I was honored to be President Obama's personal representative at the joyous independence celebrations in Juba, South Sudan, just over 4 years ago. So for me, like so many of us, South Sudan's return to violence has been heart-wrenching. And that's why President Obama convened an urgent summit of regional leaders in Ethiopia when he was there in July. And in no small part, due to President Obama's personal leadership, shortly after that meeting, regional leaders finally united behind a draft peace agreement. A few weeks later, South Sudan's leaders signed the agreement. This is an essential first step, but the true test will now be in how President Kiir, Riek Machar, and their backers prove or disprove their commitment to peace. At long last, they must prioritize the needs of the South Sudanese people, almost half of whom are dependent on international aid for survival, and they need to rebuild their country. And as they do, the United States stands ready to help the people of South Sudan achieve the lasting peace they deserve. In Darfur, where war crimes continue, we're working to end the horrible conflict by strengthening opposition parties and building a national dialogue that could, if implemented, improve the way Sudan is governed. In Burundi, we're working with our partners to suspend some assistance and supporting efforts by the East African community, the AU and the UN, to broker an end to the crisis. The United States and the international community are united today in responding to the crisis in Burkina Faso. The junta should step aside and allow preparations for October elections to resume immediately. The United States stands squarely with the people of Burkina Faso in rejecting this threat to their democratic progress, for which they have worked so hard. And so we're reviewing our assistance to Burkina Faso in light of evolving events. Under President Obama, the United States has significantly increased our efforts to bolster peacekeeping capacity in Africa. With the African Peacekeeping Rapid Response Partnership, we're committing more than $100 million a year for the next several years to help our partners develop their capabilities, including lift capacity and medical expertise, to deploy rapid response forces, prevent conflicts, and save lives. With our partners, we're facing down a growing terrorist threat. In Somalia, we continue to provide training, equipment, and funding to support the African Union's mission to root out al-Shabaab and strengthen Somalia's security institutions. In the fight against Boko Haram, we're increasingly providing specialized advisors, training, and equipment and intelligence support to Nigeria and its regional neighbors. We're combating wildlife trafficking, yes, to preserve Africa's ecology, but also to shut down illicit flows of money to terrorist networks. And critically, we're working with governments and community leaders to counter violent extremism before radicalization to violence can occur. In Nigeria, Niger, and Chad, we're increasing civilian security and building resilient communities targeted by Boko Haram. We're supporting efforts in northern Mali to promote reconciliation and mitigate conflict, particularly in isolated communities. And we're working with governments to responsibly address legitimate grievances that terrorists might exploit, as in Ethiopia, where American legal advisors are training police and lawyers to better uphold the rule of law. Finally, I want to highlight our unprecedented investments in the future of Africa and its greatest asset, its people. Nothing captures our commitment better than President Obama's Young African Leaders Initiative, or YALI. YALI offers emerging leaders in government, business, and civil society from across Africa the chance to develop their skills and connect with their peers, both in Africa and the United States. Since 2010, the YALI network has grown to more than 145,000 members from every African nation. By the end of this year, YALI Regional Leadership Center will be open in Nairobi, Accra, Dakar, and Pretoria. We've established practical training tools, courses on public speaking, networking, how to launch a startup that are accessible online. And next year, we're expanding the Mandela Washington Fellowship, which brings young Africans to train at American universities. We'll double the number of African fellows from 500 to 1,000 and begin sending young Americans to Africa, strengthening the connections between our countries. Even as we prepare the next generation to take up the mantle of leadership, we're striving to ensure they inherit societies that are more free, more fair, and more just. Societies that provide opportunity for all of Africa's people. So we champion democracy, good governance, peaceful and regular transfers of power, active civil societies, and a robust free press. Not because we have all the answers, but because healthy democracies are consistently more peaceful and more stable. They are the strongest partners and the best able to provide for their people. We highlight the damage corruption is inflicting on the continent because Africa's potential will never be fulfilled if elites are skimming off the top or if leaders cling to power while they rob their people for personal gain. And each time President Obama made that point on his latest trip, he was met with rousing applause. The United States speaks out on behalf of Africa's daughters and their right to grow up without being forced into early marriages, without being mutilated, without being abused. We speak out for our African LGBT brothers and sisters and their right to equal treatment under the law. We speak out for Africa's minorities and the right to worship freely and pursue one's dreams. We make clear that every government has a responsibility to protect the human rights and the safety of all of its people. And that when traditions say that some groups should be excluded or targeted or oppressed, then those traditions are wrong. And they have no place in the 21st century. They do nothing but hold societies back. So our investment in Africa's future is both immediate and enduring. We're expanding our trade and investment while laying the groundwork for deeper cooperation for years to come. We're promoting sustainable development solutions that reduce hunger and combat health challenges while spurring the broad-based economic growth that can eradicate extreme poverty. We're taking steps to bolster our shared security today and tomorrow. We're supporting Africa's youth and challenging Africa's leaders to govern with an eye to the future. Africa's rise is not just important for Africa, it's important to the entire world. Those are President Obama's words, and that's something all of you have known for quite some time. Today, after 4 presidential trips to the region, an historic summit with almost 50 African leaders here in Washington, signature economic and development initiatives that are opening doors for more people across the continent. Many others now know it too. We have more work to do. More work to end old mindsets and address entrenched challenges, both in Africa and here at home. But this much is clear. Under President Obama's leadership, the United States is redefining the way we engage with Africa, not as a paternalistic patron, but as permanent, equal partners. And I know that partnership will continue to benefit from the support, the wisdom, and the goodwill of everyone here for many, many years to come. Thank you all.
Opportunity to meet with some key people from the DRC and with Ambassador Latifi before she left her post. And they are very clear what the benchmarks are. And so, you know, I don't want to take a lot of other people's time, but they actually do know what they need to do and are putting together documents to show that they are indeed doing it. We recognize that progress has been made on the issues for which they lost their low eligibility, but they have some other things that they need to do beyond that. So I would just leave it at that they are working on it and we are talking to them about it.
Thank you very much. What I will do, if the panel permits, is I will go one last round of questions. You do it very quickly, and then you will do your 1-minute closing remarks or 30-second closing remarks and answer any questions that we get. That way we get as much questions as we can. Let me start with you. It must be 1-minute question or 30-second question.
Lawrence Freeman from Executive Intelligence Youth. The passage of the bill is good, but you need to look at another approach, which is that without massive infrastructure projects, which can have to be funded by the state and allies like the BRICS New Development Bank and the China Silk Road, we will not have peace and development. Electrical power was mentioned. There's 90,000 megawatts of power for all of sub-Saharan Africa, of 1 billion people. Half of that comes from South Africa. For Africans to live like all of us in this room, we need 1,600 gigawatts. South Africa is getting almost 10,000 gigawatts of power. The question is, don't we have to approach the problem of Africa from the standpoint of governments, state-funded credit with allies such as China, the BRICS Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Bank, and without this, these other smaller approaches won't work. And the United States has said repeatedly, this administration, we don't do infrastructure. So doesn't that pose a question that we have to change the policy of the United States if Africa is really going to be developed and we're going to end war and peace and starvation?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next question.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Nuberi Kunsinde. I'm with the Africa practice at the law firm of Covington and Burling. I'd ask the panelists to provide both the public sector and private sector perspectives on what more can be done to commercialize Africa's creative industries and innovation more generally. And I'm speaking in the areas of startup capital, areas of intellectual property protections, and those sorts of areas that are needed to provide the protections and the growth that Africa's creative industries will need to become actually commercial enterprises.
Wonderful. You should stay for the next session. Part of that will be discussed there as well. Next question.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Nkafu Fomeki. I'm a third-year law student from the University of Baltimore, principally from Cameroon. I think my question already has been asked in a couple of different ways, but I still want to pose that question again. And I'll pose a question to Mrs. Flory that what are the measures put in place by the US government to guarantee that business in Africa doesn't exploit the people? Considering that we know most of the government in Africa...
Okay, I think we got the question, is what can you do to make sure that there is no exploitation by business? And the next question, thank you.
Hello, my name is James Wallace. I'm with Align Global Strategies in Richmond, Virginia. We provide broadband training and installation services and also BPO or call center services as well. We specifically work with low-income communities and with youth. And so there was a couple of discussions about youth training. We've also reached out to Ghana. We have registered with Ghana, but having some challenges in terms of getting training funding in countries in Africa. So my question is, what type of similar youth initiatives like workforce investment in the United States are in the countries in Ghana as well? I mean, in Africa as well. That's my question.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. Thank you for listening, and thank you again to Congresswoman Karen Bass for putting this together. I think, as we can see, the discussions in Africa are quite interesting. But I will pass it over to the panelists now to give you a 30-second conclusions. And I think the best way to implement what we're discussing here is to go and invest on the continent, do the joint ventures of the continent. The businesses are waiting for you. Thank you. Conclusion?
Yes, I think actually the thing that I would like to put out to everyone here is that, and it is true that partnership does actually happen now between governments. It has to happen between the U.S. government. African governments have a role that they can play and should play in terms of attracting investment and promoting trade and helping their entrepreneurs. The U.S. government has a whole range of programs. We are doing things in infrastructure through MCC. We are committed through Power Africa to help increase electricity in Africa, and we have a range of programs. But the main point I want to make, and sort of my plea, is everybody has a part. There is a role that businesses need to play, making sure that governments in Africa and the U.S. government here understands what you need in order to facilitate partnering and joint venturing on a business level. So society has...
Yet playing the role that it should play in the continent. There's plenty of room. We are all waiting, and America again is not is not playing fully the role it should play in Africa. Now, the time is right. We're ready for it. And I think that the future of our continent of Africa is in small and medium-sized businesses in partnership. So we welcome all of you. We're ready to work with you whenever you're ready to work with us. So thank you.
I would like to just make a plea for to U.S. companies, investors, really look at Africa. But when you look at Africa, think about the 3 P's: patience, physical presence, and partnership. You've got to consider this is the last frontier, and there are a lot of tremendous opportunities. Second, to the US government, infrastructure is critical. There will be no way, we're just talking about on the health with Ebola. Health pandemic like Ebola is also about due to the infrastructure. There was no infrastructure in those countries, and there is still no infrastructure in those countries. We cannot develop the continent if there is no power. So if we don't have comprehensive infrastructure in place. So investment into infrastructure beyond what we have today with MCC, looking at that in a comprehensive manner is helpful. Looking at our multilateral banks, be it the IMF World Bank or now the BRICS, we got to really look at infrastructure for the long run. To the African government, you need to create an enabling environment for companies to come, feel safe, and then operate. Not just US companies, but our own African companies. Yes. You know, I was amused when Dangote said that it was easier for foreign companies, foreign out of Africa, to do business in the Francophone than an African Anglophone, English-speaking company to do business in a French-speaking country. That should not be the case. So our own governments really need to look at creating the right environment. And I think that the next panel is going to talk about the right environment on the political sense. And democracy is not just about election. We got to look at the judicial aspect of things. So those will be just 3 months. Thank you.
As I started out, I said Africa is rising, but it certainly needs you. It needs you to come home and be a part of the nation building. It needs you to come home and to invest in making Africa the continent that it was meant to be. And that is going to take each and every one of you taking the giant step past the fear, past the propaganda, past the hype, and know that this is the continent of your forefathers and mothers. And once you come home and connect to the soil, everything starts to line up. It's like click, 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 because you've made it home. And you can make a difference. I've made a difference, and I know you. If you want to come home, call me. The African Community Bridge Foundation is there. I'm there with Neva International, looking for partners, looking for businesses that want to come home and be a part of the infrastructure. The textile and apparel industry is growing rapidly in Africa, and I'm standing right there to welcome each and every one of you that's ready to take that giant step and to be a part of the nation building of the continent. Welcome.
Thank you very much again. Thank you for being here. I want to thank once more all the ambassadors that have been here that have helped us to move AGOA forward. I think 3 key messages. The first is that we need partnerships. The AGOA Act is now renewed for 10 more years, so there is 10 more years of a window of opportunity. With the depreciation on the continent, there is space for investment on the continent with improving business environments, as we have seen in Gabon, in Senegal, in Togo, in Burundi, in Kenya, in Ethiopia. There are diverse ways of investing on the continent. I think that right now all the African presidents, just 2 weeks ago I was in New York. Bridgestone is investing in the Ebola countries. I must say that this is one of the very, very commendable acts of U.S. businesses, that they have gone and they have stayed in the Ebola countries, in Guinea, in Sierra Leone, in Liberia. It has been, I think, an amazing fact. 600,000 Liberian farmers can actually continue to grow their rubber for Bridgestone and Firestone. If companies like Bridgestone, if companies like General Electric are there, I think that there is a clear sign that the African businessmen and the African countries are open for investment, and we hope that they will have more and more partnerships between the US and Africa as the AGOA Act goes on, as the MCC continues to do now more regional investment, which will help facilitate and capacitate NGOs to work better between Africa and the United States. So thank you very much once again. Thank you, Congresswoman Bass and all her staff for putting this together and disciplining us. Thank you.
Congresswoman Bass, and let me first just thank you for this tremendous moment in history, for your tremendous leadership, and for all of you for being here and being on the case, saying that Africa matters for so many years. Now, I just have to say, listening to our National Security Advisor, Ambassador Rice, I just had to really think about the moment we're in history. Here we have an African-American president whose father is from Kenya. We have an African-American woman as our national security advisor. We have an African-American woman as our ranking member of the Subcommittee on Africa. Of course, I'm serving as the president's nomination from the House of Representatives to the United Nations. And I'm very honored for that. But it just tells you how far we've come and how Africa now, because of Karen Bass and Susan Rice and President Obama, not only does Africa matter to the African-American community and to people in the diaspora and Africans around the world, but it matters to the entire United States of America. That's because they have made it central in our foreign policy. And so listening to Ambassador Rice just made me feel so proud and so honored to serve with her and Karen Bass and this entire administration, because I know where we've come from in terms of Africa and the focus and the direction and the commitment to the continent. So we've got to keep this going on. And I know with Congresswoman Bass and our president and our national security advisor, we're going to move forward in the next few months and really make sure that whoever is in this White House next time around, Africa will matter and will continue to matter. And it's going to be because of you and these great people. So thank you again. Congratulations.
Someone that has contributed so much to the cause of the, I would say, Afro-Caribbean, African-American. This is Pedro Martinez. Welcome very much.
The one and only Yosvaniteri Carrera,
and the music that we're playing is actually inspired and based on some of the legacy that we have in Cuba and the African world that came many years ago, I would say like 300 or 400 years ago, from the kingdom of Dahomey, which is nowadays Benin. So we are playing music. There's a great dancer with us, Oscar Rousseau. And he's presenting all the deities that we're playing for. We started the concert playing for Wafra, who's like, it's the trickster, he's the child, but he's also the communicator, the mediator between us and the high priest. And then we continue with Asohano, who is also known in other cultures, like the Yoruba culture, and he made his pilgrimage to become king in the Adana world. And now we're continuing with Afrikete, who is the deity that embodies the ocean, the motherhood, and also feed the community. So there's so much.